This is the Portland Press Herald's Business Breakfast, recorded live on January 24th, 2018 at the Portland Public Library. The panel today is Durward Ferland. He helps lead information assurance services at Macpage and advises clients nationwide. Mark Monnin, who currently teaches courses in cybersecurity and information technology at the University of Southern Maine. And Rick Simonds, President and COO of Sage Data Security. The moderator is Portland Press Herald business editor Carol Coultas.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sliding in to join us. When we were talking about topics for this year's Business Breakfast Forums, the Equifax breach had just happened. We thought that would be a great opportunity to look at cyber threats in a different way. I remember reacting to that thinking, how in the world could that happen with a company like Equifax? Their whole purpose of being is to gather and protect data and then distribute it discreetly in very protected channels. So that really sort of set me back on my heels. And then not too long after that, we heard the news about the vulnerabilities that processing chips have in so many electronic devices that they're sort of hardwired to have these vulnerabilities in them. And for me, who I am like the least technical person on earth, so my reaction to such things is to feel helpless and to feel intimidated and overwhelmed whenever we talk about data issues. I do that when I think about, I wonder if my little credit union is secure enough with my financial information, and I wonder about it in the context of civic engagement. We've been hearing a lot of, a lot of fire and brimstone around the alleged Russian hacking last year in our elections, but we haven't been hearing a lot about what's happening to protect those sorts of systems. So my default position is, I'm glad I still use paper checks, and I'm glad my town still uses paper ballots. But I recognize that that's not a very forward-thinking frame of mind. So when we were talking about cybersecurity issues, in order to get our arms around it, we decided we would try to focus specifically on cybersecurity issues facing small businesses. And there was a really interesting study that IBM commissioned that showed about 1 in 4 small businesses will have to deal with a data breach of some form, and that those typically cost about $3 million to resolve. So for a small business, that's very significant. And one of the other things that this study said, a lot of people think, small business, maybe they're too small for cyber criminals to bother with, but in fact they're considered the low-hanging fruit because a lot of small businesses don't have their own internal IT departments, or cybersecurity isn't something that they make a priority. So we have assembled a great panel of people who are real experts in this field, and I will introduce them, and then I have some questions to get the ball rolling. But our custom at these forums is to have informal conversations. I encourage the panelists to comment on each other's observations, and we will have a question and answer period at the end. But if you have a burning question while we're talking about something, put your hand up, and we will recognize you at that moment. So without any further ado, Nick already introduced Durward, so I'll just quickly say, I thought Macpage was mostly an accounting firm, but in fact they've been expanding and doing a lot of consultancy and other kinds of professional services. But Durward really focuses on assessing cyber vulnerabilities in companies and then coming up with solutions and services that will help address that. He has a fistful of certifications that would take too long to read out, so let me just assure you he's an expert, and I'm delighted that he's here. And then next to Durward is Mark Monnin, who is a lecturer at the University of Southern Maine. He works with their cybersecurity lab. He's been in education and has been teaching IT in computer science since 1988. And I think that he has a great perspective because he can talk to us or let us know about not only whatever is really new in that world, but also what's the attitude of the next generation of people. I mean, some of these people were born in the year 2000, and so they only know internet-related worlds. So how does that affect small businesses and the security issues that they might be thinking about? And then to Mark's left is Rick Simonds, who is COO at Sage Data Security. That company only deals with assessing security threats and helping businesses design systems that will protect them. And so he also has a fistful of certifications that's too long to go into right now, but is also an expert in the field. And he's battling the flu and yet still managed to rally to be here with us this morning. So I'm very grateful for that. So let's get the ball rolling. And the first thing I wanted to ask is, what is the first thing I wanted to, oh, okay. So what are the biggest cybersecurity threats facing small business today? I think that's a great place to start. And then the follow-up question is, and what do you do about that? So Durward, do you want to get the ball rolling?
Sure. One of the things that cybersecurity is the buzzword of the day. Cybersecurity is what gets people's attention. The names of the various viruses, Trojans, ransomware, whatever happens to be out there changes every day, but the actual threat that we're dealing with is the same threat that we've been dealing with for a long time. It's the wrong person getting access to your information, the right people not being able to get access to your information, or your information not being correct. That's the CIA, or confidentiality, integrity, availability. So the threats that we are trying to address are the same threats that have been there all along. Cybersecurity is just the latest buzzword that they have attached to that. And I think the comment was, you've been teaching this since 1988, so you've seen the various iterations of this come through, but what we're really trying to do remains the same, is protect the CIA, or confidentiality, availability, integrity of that information. So the biggest thing that has happened, and you feel free to comment on this, Mark, over time, is the speed that we're dealing with. So the threats haven't changed so much as the speed has changed. Originally things had to travel by floppy disk. So if you updated your antivirus once a month or once a year, probably good enough, because it took a long time for that virus to make its way around on floppy disk to floppy disk to finally get to your system. Or if you didn't patch your systems right away, it didn't really matter because they weren't connected to anything else. So what, it had vulnerabilities or a little bug in it. If you weren't connected, nothing really ever became of it. But in today's world, from your home computer with the cable modems at home through to our businesses with the costs coming down every day of faster and faster connections, all of us live in a state of always on, always connected devices. So the threat that we're addressing hasn't changed so much as the speed has changed. Now we need to update those devices in practically real time because they're always connected. It's not going to take a year for that floppy disk to work its way around and finally get to your system. It can get there in seconds. Or it's not going to take years for that vulnerability on your system to get noticed when you do that one calculation, but that security vulnerability or that security hole that goes unpatched can be exploited in seconds now that we're always on or always connected. So I don't think the threat has changed so much as the speed that it attacks us and the speed that we need to react to it has changed.
Thank you. Mark?
Well, I want to start with, cybersecurity is a very large field. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the threats that we will see, especially the external. But when Durward said about this CIA confidentiality, integrity, and availability, this is the buzzword in any intro to cyber experience that you have. And it covers everything as far as, oh my goodness, the janitor spilled water on my server and now my server is toast. So it goes beyond the simple, criminal aspect. But when I think about just the criminal parts and thinking about the criminal threats, the big one is wire fraud. And realistically, the way I explain it to my students is there are people that are trying to take your money. All cyber security threats, all criminal threats, are about taking your money in one way or another. And so wire fraud oftentimes are like, if they can get access to your banking information so that they can log in. Well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to transfer all your money to an off-site, offshore bank and see you later. So that's number one. Number two, I think a lot is credit card fraud. And where I see this is slightly different is this is the exposure to the small business of being sued. So one of the things that I often think about in credit card fraud is not our credit cards getting stolen, but what happens if we're the holders of credit cards and now, oh my goodness, we've got all these lawyers that are saying, okay, we're going to sue you because you didn't practice what's called due diligence. The third area, which is since the history of time, is internal. What's happening to other employees inside your business? Am I giving them the keys to the kingdom in such a way that they could actually be the one stealing my money? The new buzzword we hear about is ransomware. But again, that's just yet another way of saying, okay, how can I get you to pay me for something? And I probably will stop here to give Rick something to talk about.
So, yes, Rick, can you continue to terrify us?
I don't want to terrify you. I don't want to say that the sky is falling. Cybersecurity, it's business. And it's big business. And the criminals are looking to maximize a return on investment with the least possible effort. Most of what you hear, it's not targeted that they're going after a particular person. It's automated tools, scanning items on the internet to find out what's easy, and they can get in. It's incredibly easy. We've got penetration testers now, and just about, I won't say everything, but most of the items that we test that have exposure to the internet, we can gain some kind of access. And a lot of it's because the controls that we've been preached for years, they're not adequate anymore. How many of you have heard that your passwords for your employees are supposed to be 8-character complex passwords that change every 90 days? Does that make sense? Yeah. So let me tell you what the password is for approximately 5% of your employees. Right now the password is winter 2018 with a capital W. In another couple months, it's going to be spring 2018 with a capital S. And it's summer, fall, it never repeats, it hits all the complexities. It's easy, I mean, everybody has so many passwords they have to remember. They need something that's easy. They need something they can remember and come up with, and it's not adequate anymore. And if we can get in there and do that, anybody else can. All the breaches that we've heard the past couple of years. I think in 2013, Yahoo, they came out and they said 1 billion users' accounts were compromised. And then in 2014, they came out and said another 500 million accounts were compromised. And then this year they said, you know what? We've done some more research and it wasn't 1.5 billion. Everybody's account was compromised, and that's 3 billion user accounts are compromised. Well, if I can go to Pastebin and download a database that's got everybody's login name and password, and I can sort by the password, well, I can get 5% of the passwords now that I know we're winter 2018, but you can sort that by what is the most common passwords out there. Passwords aren't effective anymore. I mean, our controls in general aren't effective. We get into systems because default usernames and passwords are still on devices. We did a electronic medical record scan for a client to test it from the outside. There's a patient portal. When the people set it up, the username for the portal is portal. The password for the portal is portal. And we can log on, we can download anything from that. Why? Because this company that maintains electronic medical records, they've got thousands of customers. They want something that's easy for them to remember so they can log into any system. We've got to get better at, passwords, taking away the default credentials. I mean, it's just the easy things that you can do to make that little hanging fruit go away. Multi-factor authentication. I could go on for the rest of the day, but it's what we do. So I'm just going to stop.
Well, you actually did segue into the next question, and so that is, are there cost-effective things that small businesses, the ones without IT departments, can do in order to mitigate the risks that you three have just laid out. You want to expound a little more on that, Rick, since you were talking about
Sure.
the need for more complicated passwords.
Third-party vendors are a real problem on accessing your network. Do any of you have credit card terminals and take credit card numbers? No? All right. Maybe not. I'll just give an example. So the Secret Service this year was working a case of 500 convenience stores, restaurants, small businesses that took POS terminals and took that information for credit cards. Those were all hacked because the third-party vendor that supports all those, one username, one password, 40 employees, and they can come in remotely to administer those networks. Never change the passwords, never. It just comes out to common hygiene, common sense. I mean, it's that real easy stuff. There's probably about 9 items that you can do to take away 90% of the threats against your network. I'll pass it right over to you, Mark.
Okay, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to continue to harp on passwords, but I will. So first of all, number one is if you're using the same password on all your systems, stop. You need to, at this point, have a unique password on every single different system that you have access. Because it's not going to be, will my system that I'm using will it get compromised? If you have 10 services or whatever, one of them will. And what you don't want to happen is that they have not, they had access to your Facebook. Oh my goodness, that's the same login that I use for my payroll, or that's the same login that I use for my own credit card. So a unique password in each one. There are free tools and pay services to do password managers. I've kind of evolved to using a password manager. So consider using password managers.
What are those? What's a password manager?
Oh, good point. So a password manager is just a program or a service that's designed to store. It's just a simple database that has, here is the service that I'm using. Maybe it's Facebook. Here's my login, and here's my password for it. And they're set up in such a way, some of the better ones, so that they will automatically do the login, that you log into your master system that has a list of all your passwords, and you say, okay, I'm trying to log into Twitter, send the password to Twitter for that. There are services, the big one is called LastPass. I think they're the elephant in the room when we talk about password managers. I haven't really evaluated them enough to just say that I like them or not, but they are probably one of the biggest players in the games. There are free ones that you can download for your iPhone, for your Android devices, for your PCs, Macs, whatever. The second part about this is I think it's almost time to stop trying to create your own passwords. So with a password manager, I don't try to ever come up with the passwords myself. I have the computer generate a completely random password. And since I'm using a password manager, instead of using a 8-digit password, I can use a 20 or 30-digit password because I never type it in. And then the next part of that is consider two-factor authentication. And so what two-factor authentication is that I need something beyond a password to get in. So the latest iPhone and the latest some of the other phones have fingerprint scanners, so that not only do I have to enter a password, but I also have to do a fingerprint. I'm not saying fingerprint instead of password, I'm saying fingerprint and password. So I've got a little device and I'm playing with it, and to be honest, I'm the shoemaker's son who runs around barefoot. So I haven't yet embraced two-factor authentication, but I play around with it. But I do have a little device here that if I want to play with a password manager and set it up to require it, that I need to have this device plugged into the computer and know the password before it even lets me into a password manager.
How expensive is a password manager? If you want one of the paid services, how expensive is that?
Some of the cloud services are even free. I think the small ones are around $5 a month is, I think, what the premier ones do.
Per user?
Per user, and then they do have a business one where, it's a certain amount per person, and then it gets down to the $2 range, I think, per user per month. But again, there's a number of free services, so I'm not necessarily advocating for go spend money. One of the advantages, though, of some of these cloud-based ones is that you can handle another issue, and Durward talked about it earlier, is availability. We have the other problem of being hit by a bus. What happens if the person who has the keys to your financial system gets hit by the bus? Can you get logged in? And so sometimes these cloud systems allow it to say, okay, I can get a password here if certain constraints have been met, to be able to share passwords securely. You want to chime in?
And along the lines of your original question on, what are some of the inexpensive ways that you can protect yourself? Most of the things that cost money are already being done. Having the firewalls in place, having the virus scanning in place, having somebody monitor your firewalls in place, all of the things that cost money are probably already being done in most businesses. The thing that's left, as far as being inexpensive goes, some of the best solutions or best things that need to be done at this point are all free. Employee awareness training. Employees are the weakest link in your company. Your systems are good. Your computers are good. Your firewalls are good. All the products that are out there these days, if you're using something made in the last several years, you have pretty good devices in general. They need to be patched, they need to be kept current, but your devices are fairly solid. Your people are not. People tend to be the weakest link in everything that we're talking about. One of the things that Mark mentioned earlier was wire fraud being something that's going around right now. Well, the only way that wire fraud works or that wire fraud is effective is if one of your employees falls for it. So if your people are trained, what do these fake emails look like? If you do not get a handwritten note from me on your desk to transfer the money, it was not authorized. I am never going to send you an email with a link asking you to transfer the money, or whatever the case may be. But training your employees on what to know, what to look for. Don't open emails that you aren't expecting. Don't open any attachments that you're not expecting or that didn't come through your secure email system. Most people have some sort of a portal where secure emails can be exchanged. So if the attachment didn't come through that system, it probably at this point is not legitimate. People aren't sending confidential information through regular email. They're sending it through your secured portal. So if something that looks confidential or important comes through regular email, it probably isn't. So really, a lot of these things that are the biggest threat to your organization, being with the employees, they're free to address or free to resolve. And then the other one, of course, to come back to the first point of the speed of what things happen, patching these devices. All of your systems have some sort of a maintenance agreement that is getting you these patches out there. Make sure that you're applying those. And then the last one that still is rather inexpensive for small businesses is being prepared. The comment that was made in the opening remarks is 1 in 4 small businesses are going to be attacked. So it's not really a question of if it's going to happen, it's a question of when it's going to happen. What have you done to be prepared for that? So making sure that you have a disaster recovery plan or an incident response plan. Again, that's not something that requires a lot of money. It requires time to develop and work through and think through what you're going to do to resolve the issue when it happens. What are your communications going to be? Do you have communications ready to go out to your customers, members, whatever the case may be, when this happens? It does cost money, but cybersecurity insurance is going to do a couple of things. It can help you get ready because it's in the insurance company's best interest to minimize your risk. But also it's going to help you when something does happen because now you have the insurance company on your side helping you to recover from this and walking you through the steps. And then part of that whole disaster recovery piece is having backups and testing them. There's so many cloud-based services, there's replication, there's so many different ways that you can back up your systems, either to other locations you have, to the cloud, to one of the providers. There's ways that you can do it that don't have to be very expensive, but that gets you something to go to if there is a problem or if you are hacked. So training your employees is free or very low cost. Being prepared, there might be some cost associated with that, but it will happen. So being ready for it is a big piece of it. And I think we saw a question in the back as well.
Oh, yes, go right ahead.
Regarding the training the employees, I've heard that one of the largest areas, the most vulnerable areas in an organization can be the HR department, because if they're advertising for employees, new hires, they send in a resume, they click the resume, and that may be a phishing scam.
It's a great point, and they have the HR department certainly has the keys to the castle as well.
So just expounding on that a little bit, because several of you have mentioned employees being kind of the weakest link in the security protection in a company. What do you consider essential training, and what are the things you look for when you're recruiting? Like, are there any red flags that you would say that this person would somehow represent an increased risk for my company because of cyber issues, or is it mostly you hire for the position and then you do intensive training? Rick?
I would hire for the position and then train. I mean, the chances that you're going to hire somebody to come in that is a cyber expert and knows everything that can protect your company, it's probably non-existent. I agree that people are the weakest link. I've seen some success in the training that instead of having one person clicks on a phishing email that's malicious, can put the entire company at risk. Turn it around for your training that you make it fun, you get it so your employees embrace the training in cybersecurity, throw some gamification in, so that way if you've got 2 or 3 people within your company, because it's typically not targeted to one email to one person in the company, so if 5 people get a phishing email within your company, if one reports it, that one person can save the entire company versus the one person that can put it at risk. So the training is huge. You're never going to have everybody that's never going to click a link. You're always going to have one person in every company that's going to open up every email they get, open up every attachment, click every link within it. So then you got to try to have some controls in place to block that. For the HR department, what we've done is we've got mobile. It used to be good technology, good for enterprise. So I could have my cell phone, my iPad, or anything else like that, and it's a container within your mobile device that's encrypted, but I can open it up and I get email to it. They were bought by BlackBerry. I thought BlackBerry was going out of business. They're still around now. But anyway, I open up and our HR people open up on an iPad. So, it can be off the network, could be a totally separate network. The mobile device software syncs with it, the attachments come down and we can open it up and it's not exposing our corporate infrastructure to those malicious attachments or Word documents. You're absolutely right. We hired somebody recently that worked for the Cyber Command out of Fort Meade. And his job there was one of them, when I think footprinting, because we do penetration tests and we footprint for a couple hours to find the easiest way into a network. He spends a year doing that for a target and writing up a huge report. But the other thing he does is writes malware for macros and Word documents and Excel documents. And he's really good at it as far as red teaming or penetration testing. It's an easy way to get in your network. I think we touched on it before as wire transfers. Don't believe anything you necessarily get in an email. I've seen spoofing at financial institutions where the CFO's machine gets compromised. Somebody goes through his Outlook and he's looking for wire transfers, what the terminology, and they'll copy and paste the previous email type thing, they'll change the bank, ABA, and routing numbers, and they'll send it to whoever does the routing transfers to, we bought a new business, we're doing this, make the wire transfer. Never do that. It's called whaling because they're going after the big fish. Always followed up with a phone call. It's like that multi-factor authentication, have it 2 or 3 levels, walk down the hall and go into somebody and say, do you really want me to do this wire transfer? Just don't take it from an email and do it. Have a policy in place or a procedure in place for those wire transfers or anything you do that has anything to confidential information with your company.
So going back to what Durward said about the speed of things changing today, how often should companies be doing this training? Like, is annually enough, or do you recommend more than that?
Minimum annually. We see some companies quarterly. Financial institutions are really good. They've been GLBA, they've been doing this type of training and regulation since about 2001. Hospitals a little bit further behind, and most of the other businesses, you guys are thinking, this will never happen to me. It's only the big guys. It's the Home Depots, it's the Targets, those are the people that get hit, the Equifax. I got to tell you, those get disclosed and reported. I'm thinking it's less than 2 or 3% of every breach actually makes it to the media where it gets reported.
Wow.
It's all depends on what is a reportable. We worked with a hospital and we did forensics. And we can see 2 gigs of data from a server that's got patient information on it going to Latvia. And we get the attorney on the phone and they're saying, can you tell what individual patients are going there? I said, well, no, we've got the data, we don't have the packet, we've got the log files, but we can tell what's on the server, the size of it and where it's going, and we're pretty confident that was patient information that got disclosed. And this was back in 2010. And the attorney said, but you can't go to a court of law and sit there and say that this patient's data actually got breached. It's like, no. Well, we're not going to report it because we don't have to. That's changing. August of 2016, if a hospital gets ransomware or any healthcare provider, they have to prove within reasonable confidence that information didn't leave. Otherwise, they have to disclose. But most of what we see never makes the papers.
And a lot of the companies try and do the information security training right on the onboarding time. And realistically, and for small business, you're not really going to have huge amounts of training like some of the mid-size and large companies can do. But I almost would delay doing cybersecurity training on an onboarding because there's so many things that a person wants to learn. So you go, now for an hour, we're going to talk about cybersecurity. Well, guess what's going to happen? Mentally, they're going to take a nap. So I'd rather have a dedicated time later on to say, let's have a frank discussion about what you can do to be an ally to help us keep our company safe. And one of the things that I always pitch with this is, A, be part of the team. Everybody is part of the team as being secure. And B, I try to tell people who are doing the teaching and the higher level administrators, you don't want to go down negatively. You don't want somebody to say, oh my goodness, I know I did something bad, but I won't tell anybody because I'm afraid of getting in trouble. So I usually say, okay, if you do make a mistake, I want to know about it, and then we'll deal with it. But, I want it to be safe enough environment that you're going to feel that you can tell me that you lost the keys to the building or you did whatever that I need to work on.
So one of the issues that Durward mentioned, and something that I had read about and didn't even realize that this was available now, is data breach insurance. Is that a good deal for a small business? Like, would that cover if you got a ransomware, if you're in a ransomware situation? Or can you talk a little bit about what that is, what it covers, what it costs? Is it a good deal?
So just like any other insurance, I have insurance on my car. It doesn't mean that I go around and I drive recklessly and I try to get in accidents and I don't heed any of the controls on the road or which in this case would be the laws of the road. You still have to be a responsible driver even though you have insurance. Mm-hmm. The same thing applies to cyber insurance. You're not going to want to not heed all of the warnings, not be doing all of the right things just because you have insurance, but it's just like in your vehicle, it's there for when the worst happens. It's not, so the insurance is not going to be what protects you. The insurance is after something has happened, how can we get back to normal? Just like how it's going to fix your car after you get into an accident. So is it a good deal? Yes. They're not very expensive, and there's something that so many carriers are offering now. So it is a good deal for small business, and they have you can get it with various different size deductibles. So your question about ransomware, just like in your vehicle, where you have to stop and make a conscious decision. Oh, I scratched my car, or I broke the windshield. Should I pay the $250 to get the glass repaired, or should I file a claim and risk my insurance going up? You're making that the same decision with ransomware. Typically, the amounts are smaller. So if it's a smaller dollar amount, you might want to just buy the Bitcoin and pay it. If it's a large dollar amount, then you're going to get your attorney and your insurance provider involved. So that's a non-answer because it depends. But it really, depends on the situation.
And where do you get that? Like, does Cross Insurance carry database or data breach insurance, or is it a specialized line? You'd have to go to a special provider.
I know Cross is a sponsor. Is there anybody here from Cross?
Do you guys carry data breach insurance? You do. Can you give me an idea of what it costs, roughly? Just ballpark it?
The industry depends on the size of the company, the amount of assets, revenues that you guys have. So it can be anywhere from maybe a couple $100 to tens of thousands of dollars.
Per year? Is that an annual?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Thank you. That's interesting. Anybody else want to weigh in on data breach insurance?
Have somebody that is an expert review the policy, because there's really no standard as of yet that I've seen in the policies. Know what's covered and what's not covered. If you have a breach, what do you have to do? Because if you don't follow the rules, if you don't notify the insurance company within 24 hours of you detecting the breach, sometimes you're not covered. So it's a good idea. It can be to buy the cyber insurance, but know what you're buying is the biggest thing.
I think we had a question. Yes, sir.
How often do password managers get hacked?
You put all your eggs in that basket. You want to know, right?
To be honest, that's one of the questions I have about going to a cloud-based solution. Currently, my own solution, I do use a password manager, but it's on my local device. And with that, then I have to practice good backups, because if it's my device, then I have to be careful about what happens if I lose that database. Online, there are cases with this, and this is one of the things also, is that if you are the biggest player, you are the obvious target. And so there are obvious targets for password managers. But what I'm seeing is that the really good ones have been very transparent about when that happens, and are very transparent up front on what the risks are. And typically what happens with the cloud-based ones is the best ones are going to encrypt it before it leaves your machine, so they don't have your password in a form that they could read it. So they need your master password, which is never given to them, to be able to get the data. So it makes it much more difficult that even if somebody does get their password, the database, whether it's mine on my local device or through a cloud provider, it makes it more difficult to get the other ones, And one of the things that I often think about in terms of cybersecurity is me as an individual, us versus a small business versus large place versus the stuff that we read about what's going on country to country espionage. The joke that I was saying earlier, I often used it in a class, is the two people that are trying to see a lion, and one starts running, and the other person goes, "Why are you running? You cannot outrun a lion." So what's the punchline? Yeah, I only have to outrun you. Rick says, that the crimes are typically crimes of opportunity. Small businesses aren't necessarily targeted for your specific business. It's targeted because you were an easy target. So all you have to do is make it so that you're harder to break into than somebody else. And so bringing it back to password managers, if I do enough of this, the big company or the big countries, they have enough resources that they could break in. But I, as an individual, and us as small companies, are not really interesting to Russia as a country. Maybe a few of you. That's beside the point. So that I just have to make it hard enough for the, quote, professional criminal to say, Mark's too much of a bother, I'm going to try a different target instead. So, was that enough of an answer, or is that the dreaded non-answer?
I think I understand it.
Okay.
What I understand what you're saying is it's encryption.
So when I teach a course, the first couple semesters is gloom, doom, gloom, doom, gloom, doom. Here's all the bad things. And then the answer is, but how do we fix it? And much of the answers to how do we fix it comes down to this word called cryptography, which is how do I encrypt data? There are good ways of doing this, and there are bad ways. And if you do it good ways, with current computing technology, it would take one computer maybe 100 years to be able to get that data. But that all continuously changes, and so what's considered best of class today is considered junk tomorrow, and we're always dealing with that answer. But yes, the answer to how do we protect ourselves is we encrypt it in such a way that it's difficult for somebody who does not know what we typed in to get that information back, even if they have the file.
I think Rick in his earlier remarks was talking about a criminal is trying to get the biggest bang for the least amount of effort. So if you make it more difficult, you could dissuade a criminal from targeting your company. We had a question over here.
Mark, we're sold inherently unsecure systems that we apply inconsistent practice to.
Yeah, I'm sorry already.
Makes the problem worse.
Yes.
But why do you think it is that technology fails to learn lessons from the past and apply them to forward-thinking technology, specifically the Internet of Things? That was a colossal miss to take lessons learned in an IP era and apply them to devices that were going to, by a factor of 10, 20, 50, 100, increase the devices that were pervasive throughout houses, businesses, institutions, and make these entryways into our networks much more easy and much lower cost for would-be bad doers. Why do you think industry just doesn't seem to get the importance of selling secure products to business and to consumers?
All right, so my answer, and I'd be curious to find out what Rick and Durward's answer is as well, but mine is that we as consumers are looking for the cheapest product. And because we often look at price, as our primary buying thing, we will, the companies are responding with that. It's like, okay, I have to make the product, and to use your word, as fast as possible to get it out to the market so that I can make as much money on that particular product. And as soon as I'm done selling it, there is no incentive for me as a manufacturer to keep on updating the security of the device. If I'm a small shop, I'm saying now I'm working on the next product that I'm going to sell next Christmas. The larger companies, or the little bit more expensive products, they're going to think more about product life cycle, using another buzzword that we've heard before. I'm sorry, I'm using buzzwords.
That's okay.
And so there's different recommendations, and one of them is don't necessarily consider the cost as the exact reason to buy the device. Now, there are some devices that people are afraid of that, ironically, I as a security professional, I'm going, well, I'm kind of okay with it. Amazon has a product that some people love and some people hate. They go, oh my goodness. I'm talking about the Amazon Echo and the Amazon Dot, because they go, oh my goodness, there's a microphone that's in my living room that's listening all the time, and it's sending to Amazon all the time. And I go, well, I as a professional, I can actually observe the traffic, doing my miniature version of the audit logs that would show the flow going out, and saying, well, no, that doesn't happen. And so I have the tools to think, okay, will that do that? And Amazon's a big enough company that I know that that product's going to continuously be updated. If I buy John's random IP cam, probably the software that it came with, as buggy as it is, will probably be the software. There will be nothing that I can download to it to make it better. Sometimes I'm forced to do this. The classic example is hospitals. They're forced to run Windows XP on some machines. And there are ways
Wait, why are they forced to run Windows XP? Oh, is that like a really long explanation?
Well, no, it's more what happened. So if we take something like an MRI machine goes through a huge process to be certified as being safe for human patients. That certification, they said, here is the operating system that drives the controls on it, and it's running Windows XP. If they ran Windows 7 even, or Windows 10, they would have to go through the FDA certification process.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
To get recertified with it, and especially on some things like MRI or several others where you're talking about various forms of electromagnetic or radiation being things. It's very difficult to go through those certification processes again for a product. And so oftentimes, if you have to do unsafe devices that isolate them. Put them in a sandbox area. Put them on their own network so that it looks like that they're outside your business, so that they can do things, but they won't affect your core business. So, there's ways to share your internet connection so that they appear as basically in a different building or different company.
How about our other panelists on the Internet of Things and learning lessons from the mistakes of the past?
Internet of Things, it's all about making it easy for us. We love convenience. I was up at with my kids this weekend at Sugarloaf, and they've got Alexas, and they've got light bulbs that go on, and they can come home. Alexa, I'm home, and the lights come on. And in the morning, they want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and Alexa wakes them up, tells them what the weather is, gives them a news rundown.
From the Press Herald, I hope.
Of course.
Of course.
But I mean, it's all tied together. It's easy. It's convenient. The kids love it. And I'm like, don't you worry about something that's listening to everything you say in the house, because it's listening for you to say, Alexa, do this, and have it stored. No, I got nothing to hide. I'm like going, well, good. You're not running for public office in the future. That's great. But it's that whole convenience thing. You get security on one side, you get convenience on the other side. It's got to be a boundary. What Mark said is look for items that are not necessarily the cheapest, because they'll probably patch them more frequently and get firmware updates. But I was at RSA conference last year, and they had said that Internet of Things, I forget how many billion of devices that's going to come out in the next couple of years, and everything's going to be on the Internet of Things. This guy was saying, I was in bed the other night, reading a book, and I'm talking to my wife. And she's talking about the Internet of Things. And I said, this is the guy saying, he said, honey, in another couple of years, our toilet's going to be on the Internet of Things. And she goes, I'm not buying one. She goes, yes, you will. And he goes, no, I won't. He goes, think about it. You get up in the middle of the night, you got to go, a light's going to come on. And she's like, I don't care about that. She goes, well, you might for me, because if I'm standing there, I'll have better aim. And then he goes, I get up in the middle of the night and think of you, honey. When you get up in the middle of the night to go, the seat's going to warm up for you. She goes, I'm still not buying it. She goes, well, they're going to come up with a toilet, the Internet of Things, so you push a button and it's going to clean itself. She goes, I want one right now. I mean, we haven't even thought of the things out there that can be on the Internet of Things. And it comes back to change the default passwords on them, update the firmware, put a firewall so they're not connecting to everything that's out there. But our kids growing up, they've known the internet ever since they were born. This stuff's not going away. I think for us, it's consumers try to force it and have some pushback that when some of this stuff happens, get everybody to pay attention. I mean, at some point, if we don't buy unsecure things, maybe they'll pay attention to it. It's all business. I mean, we've got the bad guys that are looking to maximize their ROI. You got the people that are making firewalls, internet things and everything. They're looking to get the stuff to market as quickly as possible to maximize their ROI, which means sometimes they don't test their products the way they should. They're just going to put them out there because the hackers will find the vulnerabilities and then they'll fix them. So someone else is doing the proof of concept.
Is that actually a business practice?
Yeah, we've seen it.
Really?
We've tested legitimate email gateways where there's a portal where you can log in remotely from home and get your email. And we did a penetration test because I was buying one for our company. I thought it was a great product. We always pen test because I'm fortunate to get pen testers that work for the company, so we always pen test everything before we roll it out.
But that's a penetration test?
Correct.
Okay.
And within 4 hours, one of our guys was able to get into this system, and this goes back 5 years, and get the database that's got all the emails that are passed on this and are stored. And we called them, and they said, well, it's an email firewall. We don't do web application pen testing, which is testing the application that you'd actually log in for to see if there's any vulnerabilities. I'm like, but don't you provide the portal and that people can use this for a remote email and to log in and everything? He goes, yeah, but we run into it a lot.
Wow. Durward?
It kind of ties both of the questions together that you had asked earlier on the various devices that don't all have the same methodology applied to them, but they're lower cost ones. And then that kind of transitioned into Internet of Things. But both of those discussions fit together in the sense that, in the point that you made, why do companies sell cheaper devices that are less secure or easier to get into and not maintained? Because you keep buying them. So if people stop buying them, then they're not going to be putting those out anymore. Like there's a hardware provider over here that they will tell you straight up that they never sell the cheapest products on the market. But what they do sell are products that they have tested. They've narrowed it down to 2 or 3 of the best-in-class solutions. And no, they're not cheap. But yes, they will work. Yes, they are the best that you're going to get for that price point. So if you spend or invest that money up front, then you're getting those devices that do have that support after the fact, that do have somebody going through and checking them to make sure that they have the various patching or updates available and good operating systems and all of those pieces. So that's kind of back to your original question there. When it transitioned over into Internet of Things, you hit on a lot of the topics, but one of the biggest ones for that is keep them separated. You tend to see the Internet of Things more for consumers or at home than you do in the enterprise. At home, anybody that has a wireless router in their house that was made in the last 4 or 5 years, it has guest network availability on that wireless router. Set up the guest network and put anything that's not part of your actual computer system on that. So any of your Alexa or security system or ADT or your refrigerator or anything that might happen to have an internet, your smart TV, anything that has internet connections, get them off the network with everything else that you're doing. And then one thing that probably sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but one other option that you have with these, like you mentioned going up to the house at Sugarloaf, well, the 5 days of the week when you're not at your weekend home, unplug it. If there's no reason, if you have a smart TV in your kid's bedroom and they went away to college, and so they're gone for 6 months, unplug it. If you're not going to be in there actively turning it on, actively applying the patches, or keeping these things current, then just stop using them until it's time to go back and start using them again.
That's such simple advice.
It's a very old-fashioned answer, but it'll remove the vulnerability until you're keeping that current and using it.
Arthur.
So the list of things we need to be careful of gets longer and longer and longer. I know that companies like Mimic do training on safety consciousness. It's not here are the 27 things to watch out for on the factory floor, but how to think about how an accident might happen. And I'm wondering if people are beginning to offer training on that. Yesterday, for example, a friend of mine on Facebook said, click here, it will show you what you're really afraid of. Well, I took a look at it and I said, it's going to grab my entire list of about 4,500 Facebook friends. Common sense says, wait, do I want to expose that much of my personal data? And goodness knows, or maybe it's not goodness knows, what they're going to do to those 4,500 friends. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But that wasn't following a rule, that was following a sense that I live in a glass house, a lot of my life is open, but I want to be conscious when I'm going to open a door and who can get in.
So are there training opportunities out there? That's your question?
Yeah.
A lot of the security awareness training that we were talking about in the beginning for your employees is exactly going along those lines. Can't tell you what every single email that you're going to get that might be spoofing will look like, but here's the things to help you spot it. I can't tell you what every virus is going to react like when it shows up on your computer, but if you start noticing some of these funky things, might be time to call the IT department. So that's what a lot of these employee awareness training programs are going towards. A lot of companies use web-based ones. I know there's several providers in the room that offer some of those web-based employee awareness training solutions. So those are ones where a third party is updating those as new threats come out, so that next quarter when your employees watch them again, they have more newer stuff rather than the guy that's been sitting in the basement working on the server for the last 10 years, using the same presentation over and over again. A lot of those more online type ones, they are doing exactly that, of keeping current with. Can't tell you what everything will look like what you said. Facebook, what you're afraid of quiz was not in any of those trainings. But what was in that training is overall awareness. Where is your data going? Who is it being connected to? It'll give you the things to think about or look out for. So that's what a lot of those programs do.
And does Macpage do that kind of training?
We do not. I think you might.
But Sage does?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes, right there.
How safe do you think Dropbox is, or it's safe from Fidelity?
You mean Dropbox in general, or specific to?
We do business with somebody and they want everything put in a Dropbox, contact them, tell them it's in there, and then they reach in and take it out.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if that's...
How safe that is?
It's not the one I would use. There's a lot of secure email transfer systems out there, ways that you can set up online portals so that you can either use it for something that's an ongoing basis where you create an email-based portal, or if it's a one-time thing, you can send it as a attachment. There's dozens of ones out there that are far more secure than Dropbox, particularly because one of the things that should also scare you about Dropbox is the fact that they're one of the common ones in the spoofing emails. So it seems to, I don't know why they pick that particular one, but a lot of the click here to get your file spoofing emails that I've seen come through recently tend to always be pointed towards Dropbox. And it could be back to your comment earlier about LastPass of, they were the big name in the room for long enough that that's what all the people created these systems to mimic or to look like. But that particular one is one that kind of scares me a little bit.
Do you share that opinion, Rick?
Sorry. Anything like that in the cloud, I think it comes down to managing risk. And what type of information am I putting in there? And if it gets disclosed publicly, how bad can that be for myself personally or for the company? It's always, what's the risk of the breach versus the convenience of having it in there? You know, Dropbox can be set up, if it could be set up with multi-factor authentication, it would help you. But again, I think there's other ways out there to transfer information that are more secure. I mean, if you're looking at uploading pictures and things like that versus your income tax returns,
Right.
you know, if my pictures get out there, not a big deal. I don't have anything that important in them. If my W-2s get out or something like that, my tax information, so somebody could file a false return, that might have more concern.
Yes, the fellow back there.
Thanks. You guys mentioned ransomware a few times. I don't know if everyone in the room is familiar with ransomware. I don't think anybody explained it, so if there it is, that's fine. But curious, and I have no idea about this myself, but everybody's heard of Bitcoin at this point. Blockchain technology, how are you seeing that, or how could that impact how we manage and address cybersecurity in the future? And you guys have given that any thought yet, and where that's going?
Go ahead. Where's it? It's going up, 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 right? That's what we see every
Down,
day.
down, down lately too.
Yes, and then down, down, down. Right.
Okay, so
Just the technology underlying.
Right.
I don't care about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right, but the blockchain technology.
The underlying technology. So, I mean, for one of the things, ransomware, if nobody is unfamiliar, if anybody's unfamiliar with it, it's a way that your computer systems can become infected with malware, either through phishing emails or through a vulnerable portal that you might have, and then it encrypts data on a computer and it tries to spread and encrypt data on your network. If you don't have good backups, or if your backups are on the network and they get some of the ransomware looks for backup files on the network and it deletes them or encrypts them. So if you don't have tape backups or something like that, you might be in the position where you have to use some type of Bitcoin or exchange to pay that money to get your information back. As far as the blockchain technology, I'm not sure. I mean, the short answer, I mean, for Bitcoin, for the blockchain technology, in order to actually validate, to trace all the transactions all the way back, you download that blockchain that goes back to probably 2008 when Bitcoin was first invented, and every time there's a new transaction, it adds information on it. It's getting huge. It can take you an hour, and I don't know how many gigs it's up to now, to get that data. The smart people behind it, they will probably get it to a point where they can manage that, because as time goes on, it's going to be that blockchain itself, which is the algorithms that validate every transaction that's ever happened through Bitcoin or a cryptocurrency. It just keeps building and building and building. They've got to be, right now it's not scalable, I think, to go 10 years down the road. So I'm not sure where we're going to see it. I know there's a lot of companies with huge money, Fidelity, Chase, that are looking at it. There's other cybersecurity companies that are looking for blockchain for validation instead of passwords possibly. I think the next couple of years will be interesting. I don't know where it's going.
I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So I want to get to, there was someone who had a hand up who hadn't asked a question yet. Yes, that fellow right there. That's you.
Sounds like Dropbox is not a recommended tool. There are a lot of tools out there. Can you give a couple names of folks that you would recommend more security for cloud?
So first thing I would say is Dropbox is fine for a specific class of use. The other part is that I happen to know that Dropbox has two versions, the free version and a version for business that includes encryption. The other part that I might say is that if you're forced to do something like using Dropbox and it's making you feel uncomfortable, and I'm glad it is, there's ways that you can mitigate that by saying, okay, I'm going to store this in an encrypted zip file in Dropbox, because now then somebody who wants it has to have two break-ins. They have to break into Dropbox, and then they have to break in the encrypted zip. So there are ways that we as end users can still use untrusted or semi-trusted technologies, but use it at a little bit higher level too. As far as other opportunities, I'll leave it up to these two of Dropbox competitors.
And that will be our last question, because we're trying to be respectful of the 9 o'clock time here, but I think our panelists are willing to be around for a little bit if there are other questions that people want to ask them. So let me throw the Dropbox question to Rick and to Durward. And will you join me first in thanking them for being here this evening? So go ahead.
The two that I'm most familiar with, Zix has a product for Zix Mail, and the other one is ShareFile. Those are both, they offer enterprise level solutions. Back to the point of everything has a purpose. I do use Dropbox at least every other week, but that's to send files to a printing company for posters that I'm having printed for a nonprofit. So I don't care if someone breaks in and takes those, because it's something that I'm going to be posting everywhere anyway once it's finished. So there is a very good business purpose for a printing company. And in that case, you want the data to get out there in all actuality. So for that example, I use it all the time, but for business class stuff, those are the two names that I'm most familiar with.
We use Zix for encrypted email, just because a lot of our clients use it, and it can be seamless. So you don't have to go and log on and do a portal or anything else like that, but it's verified, everything's encrypted. For another one, like Dropbox, again, I think it depends on, I don't have another recommendation, but I agree with what everybody's saying. It depends on what you're using it for and the risk involved as to if that data does get breached, how much can it damage you.
Great. Well, thank you again for your time and your expertise this morning. And again, if you have questions and you want to approach the panelists now, that's fine. But the library kicks us out, so we have to observe the 9 o'clock deadline.
And I would like to invite up Nick Morton from Macpage. And the second that I'd like to call the sponsors.
Good morning. Good morning. On behalf of Macpage, first off, a huge thank you to the Press Herald for the opportunity to sponsor the Business Breakfast Forum's fantastic events. I am Nick Norton, principal with Macpage. Macpage is a full-service CPA and business advisory firm. We have offices in South Portland, Augusta, and Marlborough, Massachusetts. In addition to our robust services of audit and tax, obviously tax reform being on everyone's mind right now, we do have a quick growing consulting practice. I want to highlight two of the services that are benefiting a lot of our clients right now. One of those is our accounting and CFO solutions. So those organizations who would love to have a CFO and would love to have a full-service accounting team back up a CFO, but don't necessarily need a full-time CFO and or can afford one, we have a team of CFOs, accountants, and bookkeepers that allow our clients to focus on their business, and we take over the entire management of their finance and accounting to support that business. So awesome opportunity for our clients and prospects right now. The other service area that I do want to highlight is more relevant to today's discussion. Durward Ferland, also a principal at Macpage, heads up our information assurance services team. That team focuses on helping our clients understand what cyber risks are relevant to them, coming up with a plan to help address and mitigate those risks, and then testing those controls over time to make sure they're effective. Right now, two of the hot services they're providing are cybersecurity assessments and service organization control examinations or SOC examinations. So both of us are happy to chat afterwards if any questions about those services. Do want to point out we had a great showing at our tax reform open house last night, and we have some handouts based on that on tax reform in the open house up in the lobby. So as you leave, please feel free to take a coffee and enjoy your day. And again, thank you very much for Macpage.
Macpage is such a great supporter of so many organizations in our community, so we're really appreciative to have them here.